to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Stuckrath with Thrive Meetings and Events, and you're here at the live production of the Eating at a Meeting podcast. Welcome to the show. And in the Eating at a Meeting podcast, we talk about all things food and beverage with experts in all facets of food and beverage. And that includes farmers and doctors and eaters and technology owners, which is who we've got on the show today, and wide variety to help educate us on how food and beverage impacts personal experiences, business experiences, and et cetera. And so today on the show, we're going to talk to Shandy Chernow, who founded Certistar 3 years ago in order to help everyone vulnerable to food allergies have a safe and easy dining experience at restaurants or just out. She actually suffers from anaphylactic food allergies herself and has many personal experiences to draw from that inspire and drive the mission of the company. Hey, Shandy, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And I posted on Facebook to promote this show that I originally found you, and I don't know if it was you in the booth or not, but I found Certistar at the National Restaurant Show in Chicago probably in 17 or 18. I don't remember when I went. And I was like, okay, what is this? And how are you doing it? And it's something that I've always wanted to do, but I've got a different mission. And so I'm glad that you're here with your mission to help my reality come to play. So tell people about Certistar and why you were at the National Restaurant Show.
Sure. So we sell software to food and beverage, restaurants, hotels, hospitals, education, cruise lines, anywhere that you can really accomplish the task of eating food that's not at home.
Okay.
And what we do is we take the menu of the venue, rhymes,
yep.
And we turn it into an individualized allergen menu. So regardless of what allergy someone has, regardless of what combination, we cover all 170 foods that have been known to cause food allergic reactions. And we make that menu into green, yellow, red. So stoplight style. Green is allergen friendly. Yellow is with chef driven modifications, and red is unsafe. Can't fix it. So I'm never going to be able to have the shrimp cocktail no matter how much I want to because I'm allergic to shellfish.
Yep. Okay. So I love that. And it's so important and it brings two things to mind to me because I'm doing some research for a course that I'm putting together called Every Meal Matters. And when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking of also visually impaired individuals. And I found a company that actually will take your menu and put it in Braille for you. But what I learned and what I think you've probably learned in your experience too, is that you can't just take that menu and write it all in Braille. It doesn't work that way. You have to, there's ways that individuals who are visually impaired or blind read. And so and put it in chunks and things like that. So are you finding the same thing with working with restaurants and their menus?
Yeah, the menus aren't static, right? They change over time. And it's one of the beauties of being a software solution as opposed to a printed menu solution, is that as soon as something changes in the menu, we just become a part of the venue's process. So you change a menu item, you have to change what it is that you're ordering. You have to re-educate the people in the kitchen and the people out in the front of house staff. You also have to educate Certistar, if you will. So we just become a part of the process. We make the changes as the restaurants make the changes. And that way it's a live and always up-to-date solution for the diners at those particular restaurants so that they can feel safe.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the other things that I caught in your presentation and what you said originally was 170 foods that cause allergic reactions. Okay, I want to know where you got the list because I have searched the World Wide Web multiple times trying to find that list of 170 foods.
So have I. I actually haven't found that list. The truth is that we would cover any food that's in food.
Okay.
So, my biggest pet peeve, I think, in work life is the words allergy free with regard to food. This is an allergy free snack. It just immediately gets my hackles up because it can't be a snack if it's allergy free because there's food in it and someone's going to be allergic to the things that are in there. So, any kind of top 8 or top 9 or top 14 menus, I really kind of push back against because you're not covering everyone. I'm allergic to pork. I have yet to see pork on anyone's top anything menu list. And so therefore it's not an effective tool to be able to figure out what it is that I can eat. So when I go into a restaurant and they, I say, hey, we've got to have the food allergy conversation. And I always, try to be, humorous and kind and, hey, death is bad. Please help me live. When they hand me the gluten-free menu or the top 8 free menu, I'm immediately like, ooh, because there's such a reliance on those set menus for people whose allergies aren't the same as mine.
Right.
And so I feel like I'm going to be automatically less safe in some place that relies on those menus. And so that's really where Sort of Star came from. I was eating at lots of meetings, right? And I got tired of all of the effort that I really had to put in order to have my food allergies not be the center of my business conversation. So I would show up, an hour early to the restaurant, have the conversation with the host or the manager or the chef or the waiter or whoever, and then basically say, okay, now we didn't have this conversation. I'm going to sit down like I just got here when my, customer or prospect arrives.
Right.
But now we know, right? You have it written down. You know who I am. I'm going to trust you to keep me safe while I'm here. And I'm going to order as though we had this conversation, but we're not going to have this conversation because I really didn't want that to derail my business conversations. While I was eating at a meeting, I couldn't have food allergies.
Right.
Right. Well, and so therefore I really thought to myself, I'm spending so much time and energy and effort and really putting a lot of faith in people to remember the conversation we just had. Mm-hmm. And there's got to be a better way.
Well, there is. And that's where, when I thought about this a long time ago, I'm like, I've got my Excel spreadsheet. I've got how I want it to work and I have my user profiles and things like that. But it's very convoluted when you think about a hotel menu, the ordering system from behind the scenes that they're ordering from their food suppliers, whether it's US Foods, Cisco, the farmer, and then communicating that to their servers, to then communicating that to the diner. And as you were saying earlier, before we got on the show, it's like the turnaround is 7 months. Is that what you said?
The average tenure.
Yeah. And so you're constantly having to train, which is really, really important, but to train all the time. I mean, that's the essence of life, I think, too. But it does, when you don't have consistency in that. And what if you have one the certified food protection manager or the one person who's got the training in the food allergies and that person changes jobs,
right?
Goes to a different property, right? So it does make sure, I think, the consistency of the messaging across the board.
That's exactly right. When somebody's a Sort of Star customer, the training changes from, here's what's in every dish to if you have a food allergic person, no matter what their allergies are, come grab this phone or come grab this iPad or direct them to our website or whatever logistically that venue wants to do. We don't care. Right. But then all of a sudden you've got a consistent experience across every single location for every single guest. And it really takes some, the feeling of a burden, if you will, off of the service staff. I mean, imagine that, right? You're 18 or 25 or whatever, and you're working as a server in a restaurant, trying to pay rent and, kind of get through your day, and somebody comes in and all of a sudden it's on you to make sure that person lives through this meal.
Right.
That's a really heavy weight to put on somebody, right?
Totally.
I just try to make it as data-based and fact-based as possible as opposed to making them figure it out on the fly.
Right. It reminds me of the case that was in Canada a couple of years ago about the guy who ordered the beef tartare because he's allergic to shellfish and fish.
Yeah.
And they served him the fish tartare. It was dimmed lights in the restaurant and the expediting of that, nobody double checked it. and he died. Or no, he didn't die. Sorry. He went into a coma. And then he came back and he was suing the server and the restaurant for that. You don't want to put a server whose job is based on tips, in that predicament. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's such an important topic. And, we were talking a little bit again before the show. I hope you don't mind me bringing it back, but, we were talking about how a lot of times we hear from venues, oh, we don't really see that many food allergic people. Mm-hmm. Right. And statistically, 10% of the U.S. population is food allergic. So obviously that can't be true. We know that only 25% of that 10% don't eat outside the home. So that means that there's, at least 25 million people who are out there food allergic eating out.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they're unwilling to talk about it to the restaurant, which the restaurant then interprets as we don't see that many food allergic people, is kind of problem number one. Right. So food allergy people, you got to talk to the restaurants. You have to tell them every single time, right? Because something can change since the last time that you were there. And I know the conversation can get, it's painful and you don't want to have it. And everybody's trying their best to keep everybody safe, but we can't kind of rest on our laurels and order the same thing every time and assume that it's going to be safe, right? It's not fair on either side to do that. The best solution is to find the fastest way through it and to ask the questions and, be as welcoming as possible on the restaurant side and be as forthcoming as possible on the customer side.
Well, and there was an article on or a blog on your website the other day, but it about reading labels constantly. And one of I try to stay away from gums in food like guar gum and xanthan gum. I do as much as I possibly can to try to stay away from them. But there is one brand of hummus that I always ate because it didn't have any of those gums and it didn't have any citric acid in it. And it was a certain size instead of the big tube. And it was organic, red pepper. And they've gotten rid of that size to go with bigger ones and non-organic. And now they've lost me as a customer for life because I don't want those things in it when it doesn't necessarily be. So now I eat solely when I drive to 2 hours to go to Trader Joe's, but Trader Joe's horseradish hummus, because it is literally, and I should learn how to make it, but horseradish and garbanzo beans and sesame seeds. I mean, so reading those labels is really, really important. And it brings me to a little bit of a federal law thing that I want to ask you about too, is that earlier in COVID, the FDA put out notification that they were relaxing the regulations they have on labeling products. Manufacturers were allowed to relax if they needed to make a change because of a sourcing issue, that they were allowed to not notify anybody of that change. It didn't relate to the top 8 allergens that the FDA regulates, but that makes it harder for you in what you're doing, because if they added garlic to something or they added pork or gelatin or something or removed it, that makes it hard for the restaurant themselves as well.
That's right. Yeah, no, fortunately, we haven't really seen that many manufacturers taking advantage of that, lessening of regulation, if you will. And as with all things that affect only the top 8, it makes me, feel a little upset about that, but I realize we have to draw the line someplace. But no, I mean, it's really an unfortunate regulation change. I understand where it's coming from. I would mind it less if it were really just around, the sources of the different chemicals. You brought up citric acid. It's nearly impossible to tell where that's derived from. It can be derived from a lemon or from a pig and kind of anywhere in between, right? And so it's really, it's hard to tell. Same thing with maltodextrin or gelatin or, there's a whole bunch of them in there that it's difficult to tell where they're derived from. I would mind it less if it were those things. But fortunately, the manufacturers have been forthcoming with the changes that they've been making, if any. And most of them have been able to, at least on the commercial side, have been able to stick to, their advertised labels.
Okay. So mentioning the gelatin, and pork and your allergy to pork, I'm going to think that somebody who is kosher, follows a kosher diet, could actually utilize the menu information that you have through Certistar to find something that works for them as well.
Potentially. It depends on how, there's so many different rules with regard to being kosher, and we certainly can't tell whether something's been blessed per se.
Right.
It's not included in the label information that we get. But if you're from the point of view of avoiding pork or, things like that, then yeah, for sure. We could do things like that. With the places where we can't tell if something is derived from something, maltodextrin is my favorite example. It can be from potatoes or from wheat or from all sorts of different places. We flag it. We don't force it down into yellow or red because it exists there. But we just flag it and then let people make decisions based on their own, comfort levels with those different types of, I don't know if chemicals is the right word, ingredients.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because if they've realized that guar gum or xanthan gum or maltodextrin impacts them, then they can ask that question. But
you could put in, maltodextrin as an ingredient, and we would, then put that stuff into the red. But if you're not putting that level of specificity and we can't tell where it's derived from, then we just put in this little special flaggy section.
Gotcha.
Very technical term.
So in light of COVID, working with your restaurant clients now, what are you seeing in restaurants as it relates to food safety, food allergens? Have you seen a lot of them minimizing their menu offerings to make it easier? And are they still quote unquote adhering to allergen information, things like that?
Yeah, actually, from a food allergy perspective, I'm a fan of all the new food safety regulations and steps that people are taking. I feel like now the rest of the world kind of understands a little bit better, what it is that we go through, right? Which is great. Yeah. So I hope that a lot of those things kind of stick, moving forward. But I think that we've seen quite a bit of menu minimization, if you will, because, we've got lesser staff and, more phone orders and more app orders. And it's certainly easier all around logistically to have less things on the menu. Also, from an ordering perspective, if there's something that someone can't get anymore, rather than substitute a lesser ingredient, let's remove that, off the menu for the time being and bring it back when COVID lets us have that thing back, whatever it may be. Right. So yeah, I'm a fan of the new safety stuff, right? All the new procedures and whatnot. I hope that those really do stick around. We see that minimization of menus just a bit doesn't make us less helpful there. What we have heard is that with all the phone orders, having Certistar is significantly, useful and helpful, because that food allergy conversation, that 8 to 12 minutes that you see tableside, doesn't get any shorter on the phone. And so when you become kind of single threaded, you've got a phone line or two that's available into the restaurant. The number of orders you can take in a day is really determined by how many phone calls can you take. And if those are, taken over by food allergy conversations that are all of a sudden taking 8 to 12 minutes to have, then you're seriously impacting your revenue or your revenue potential for the day. And so our Certistar customers are not seeing that. They're not seeing those big, long conversations because they can direct people to their website, or they can look it up within, 30 seconds or something like that while they're on the phone. And so that amount of time is significantly lessened, which has been really great. It's been kind of an unexpected benefit for us during COVID.
Yeah, that actually is a really good benefit. Because the thing is that a restaurant, a hotel, they want to minimize their risk, and having the information at hand and going back to the systems that they have. And even thinking about a hotel, and like, you're ordering it from one system, and does that system actually talk to the other system where a banquet manager or something is in it? Right. It's a no. So it's having that in a centralized location is really, really good idea. So let's talk about just food safety in general and cross-contamination, because that's where a lot of allergic reactions come from. And I don't know if we talked about this beforehand or if it was just 15 minutes ago, but, 50% of allergic reactions that people have happen outside of the house. So they're
higher than that.
Yeah. And probably it probably is, but a lot of people go into the emergency room and have one reaction and they don't claim it to be food allergic reaction. But, so 50% of those food and beverage reactions are being done as a result of cross-contamination, cross-contact, and because the food's not being prepared by mom and dad. And let you know that food being prepared by mom and dad still happens, mistakes still happen, but.
Well, and new foods, right? You always have to have a first reaction to something. So.
Right. Well, yeah, true. I mean, there's stories of people who've eaten shellfish their whole life, and then all of a sudden they're allergic to it. So oh wow. Okay.
My allergies didn't onset till I was 28, and I started with pork. So, wow. And then, yeah, one day I was making my kids peanut butter sandwiches, and just the smell of it like sent my asthma into a tizzy. And then, yeah, over the course of the next several months, tree nuts came out and shellfish. So I reacted to shrimp, crab, mussels. And then, yeah, I think that was it. And then the doctors took away all the shellfish because they were coming out of different families and they thought it was too risky for, food challenge, anything else.
So you're also allergic to peanuts and tree nuts as well?
Tree nuts, shellfish, and pork.
Wow.
Yay. And I suspect avocados, but I'm kind of unwilling to add it to the list.
Well, especially since you live in Tucson, yeah, or Arizona, yeah.
Yeah, Phoenix.
Yeah. So that, yeah.
I don't eat them, but I refuse to talk about it much because I feel hurt by the avocados, right? Like they've betrayed me somehow.
Well, and a friend of mine actually has an allergy to avocado, and she was at an event and they served chicken salad, and being really healthy or really cool new option is the hotel changed the recipe and didn't use mayonnaise for the chicken salad. They used avocado in it. And she's in a business meeting and she runs across the foyer of the ballroom into the bathroom to get sick and to get it out of her system before it can actually do a reaction. And everybody around her was just like, huh, what? Oh, okay, we're going to go about our day. But I'm like, that's a scary situation for her.
Scary. Yeah. Super scary. There's no doubt. And people who don't have food allergies really don't think about it.
Yeah. And I said it earlier, we don't go to the store and we don't buy it to buy it. And we can't go to the store and return it. But at the same time, as a food allergic person, you can't assume that you can go into a restaurant and everybody's been trained 100% on all of these information. The turnover's, high, especially right now with COVID. It's even, unfortunately, it's even worse. So you're going to be training new people in, and their lack of knowledge is probably probably high, in understanding what those are. So,
yeah, I think for these reasons, food allergic people have a tendency to end up being a lower ticket average price, if you will. Because you end up ordering things that are super simplistic for the reasons that you just outlined. I'll just have a side of white rice. I'll just have a baked potato. I'll just have right? Because you don't want to order something that's more complex because you don't want to have the big, long conversation.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Have a little side salad or, whatever the case may be. It always starts with, I'll just have, and it's driven by a fear of ordering something more complex or a fear of having the big, long conversation. So if you have the right tools in place in your venue, you can actually end up making a lot more money, right? Because right? So if you look at like a Certistar based menu, then you have appetizers you can have and entrees and sides and desserts and cocktails. People forget about cocktails with food allergies, right? As opposed to, having somebody who's ordering a $4 baked potato or whatever the case may be. Right. They want to order more stuff. You want them to order more stuff. But that communication and the fear from the restaurant side of risk and of, taking too long and all that stuff, and the fear from the consumer of, being a pain in the neck or being that customer, if you will, it all drives this conversation to be, I'll just have a big potato, so there's so many things that you can affect in the operation of the restaurant, by virtue of having the right set of tools. And
as a server, a higher ticket gives you more tip.
Amen. And a food allergy person gives you a really high tip.
Exactly. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, because when you're eating out, and I am
gone well above and beyond 20% for the people who have really gone above and beyond for you to make you feel safe.
Exactly. And I'm tired of eating salad that just has shredded carrots and iceberg or romaine lettuce in it, which hopefully nobody's eating romaine right now. Yeah. I've done that multiple times. And I was telling you before we started my boring chicken dinner that I had at a restaurant here where I live. And I'm like, can I talk to the chef? What can I have? They're like, oh, you can have our menu item that is called boring chicken with a side of broccoli, which came out cold and the chicken came out dry. I'm like, and my mom's like, well, let's go to this restaurant for dinner. I'm like, nope, I don't ever want to go there again, which is probably with what I do, not the right answer. I'm like, hey, I almost said their name. Hey, can I come talk to you about this? Can I help you with this? So, okay, we're going to have that conversation after the fact.
Love to.
Yeah. Because
once you've had a negative experience, you don't go back to that place because you don't feel safe. And what's interesting is that all the people that you're going out with also don't go back to that place.
Exactly.
The food allergic person drives the venue.
Mm-hmm.
And even in our meetings, right? I used to work for big software companies, and the meeting planners would call me because I used to cover Las Vegas, and we would have, I was in, software sales for a long time. I would cover Las Vegas. We would have big meetings in Las Vegas, and they would call me and say, where should we do this event? Where do you feel safe? And then all of a sudden, that's a lot of money that, like, my little opinion, because some server kept me safe or didn't, is driving. That's crazy. In a good way, I guess, but crazy. And people don't realize what revenue is lost from discussions like that. One bad server, or one bad experience, or one bad chef, or whatever, right? And all of a sudden, tens of thousands of dollars lost down the road.
Well, that reminds me of a story that I've had for a while of this guy. He's a meeting planner, and he's vegan. And he went on it. He flew to a city. Let's just say, well, I won't say a city. He just flew to a city early in the morning. The city reps picked him up and did a little bit of a tour. They went to lunch and they went to a chain restaurant, which why wouldn't you show off a local restaurant? But whatever, that's a whole nother conversation. But everybody had 3 courses and he had 1, and because the only option was the salad with tomatoes and shredded carrots on it, right? So he felt excluded from that whole thing while everybody else is having 3 courses. Well, same thing, went to dinner. He said he had a little bit better option at that dinner, but he's like, I have a $125,000 piece of business that I need to now choose where I send it. And he goes, what would you do? And I said, well, if you're the guy signing the check and your client or the vendor doesn't want to accommodate you or doesn't think about accommodating you, the guy signing the check, what do you think they're going to do for your attendees?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And that was a 3-day meeting.
For food allergy.
And so food allergies, any kosher, any of those things, those dietary restrictions. Yeah. Figuring out an option, a solution for that. And that's, hey, finding a partner that can do it or bringing it in. And, there's solutions to that. And
And they're easy. They're not even hard solutions. They're easy solutions. It's just, oftentimes we hear, we're really good at handling food allergies, which I think in comparison to the bar that is out there right now, I think there are a lot of restaurants who are really good at it in comparison to other restaurants. And I think that in general, the entire food and bev industry wants to do well and wants to keep people safe and wants to do the right thing. Right.
Right.
So I analogize what we do a lot to like the typewriter versus the PC, right? So when the PC first came out in 1970, pick a year, all these people had been writing books and articles and whatever forever. I'm really good at this.
Right.
Yeah, okay. But wouldn't you like delete? No, what do I need delete for? I have whiteout and I have, I can just pull in a new piece of paper. What? Like imagine thinking that way now with regard to, not being able to hit like an up button or a down button or like edit things around or just pick them up and move them through your document. That's kind of how we see food allergies. The typewriter was great until there was a better option, right? All the training and making sure people have knowledge of the ingredients is great until there's a better option to be able to keep people even safer and in a more efficient manner.
Right.
So the right tools, the right tools at the right time. And it ends up making everybody's lives easier and better and more efficient. Okay.
So we are getting close to our time. I say this to every single one of my guests, so sorry, but I could love and talk to you about this for a lot longer. What, as a person with food allergies, what what would you like to get more of? And as somebody who attended events, what would you like to see from the person ordering the food for you? Because that's what meeting planners do. What would you like to see from them?
Choices. So what I always found, and in some meetings you don't have choices, right? Everybody's having the same thing, but sometimes they come to the table or, you go to the line of the box lunches or whatever the case may be, and everybody has options. And then there's your box. Here, Shandy, this is for you. Okay, that's great. I'm glad that I'm safe, and I'm glad that somebody considered me, but nobody asked me what I wanted. Mm-hmm. Right. I've been assigned now this particular thing, and everyone else has choices for what it is that they're having. So you had mentioned with the gentleman who is vegan, he feels excluded and he feels, different. And I would like to not feel that. I'd like to be able to feel safe and the same.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
That would be my wish list for eating and eating, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And it goes across when you're thinking about eating at a restaurant, meeting, or, because even as you as a former you're still a technology salesperson because that's what you're selling. But in your former job, taking out clients, you want to be able to give choices to those people, and you wouldn't want to lose a piece of business because you didn't have choices and options to provide your customers. Or potential customers. It actually reminds me of my friend David. When he found out what I was doing, this was years ago, he's like, oh, I never thought about that. And so when he would call and do his lunch and learns, he's like, oh, hey, do you by chance have a gluten-free menu, or do you by chance have a vegan menu? And when he sent it to one of his customers who was new and had a reputation of being a pain in the rear end, but he said that to him, and he replied back and he said, thank you so much for thinking about me. Now I don't have to eat lettuce while everyone else is enjoying their meal.
Right.
Yeah. So, and he won that client over. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Choices, right? I mean, just because we have restrictions doesn't mean that we don't still have, opinions and wants.
And the desire for food to taste good.
Totally. Yeah. No boring chicken.
No more boring chicken. Okay. So how can everybody get a hold of you?
Sure. So, our website or any social media handle at Certistar. So CERTISTAR. We also have a podcast called Shandyland. So, if you want to talk about food and beverage or food allergies, you can find us there. So every single social media handle, our website, and then you can call us at 833-EAT-SAFE.
Okay. Awesome. 833-EAT-SAFE. Love that.
Took us a minute to come up with a number that worked that way.
I'm sure. Figuring that out has got to be hard. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate the ability to talk about it a bit, and I appreciate anybody who's out there listening, and thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.